The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Good morning. First, I'd like to thank Mrs. McGrath and the members of the Multicultural Student Union, Joe Graves, Anissa Joseph, and Gary Simons, for the invitation to be your chapel speaker today. I'd also like to take this opportunity to thank Mr. Phillip and the entire Westminster community for providing a safe and dynamic learning environment where my granddaughter, Alexa Green, has grown into a young woman who is ready to tackle the world with grit and grace. It's a pleasure to be here on this day where we commemorate the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. I just want to share a little bit of my journey with equity and justice and the influence that Dr. King had on my life. When I think about this, I think I would title it, Who Knew? It began with a handshake. When I was a young child in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and trying to make sense of the world, I thought everyone in America had the same kind of life that I did. I had a loving mother and father, siblings. I lived in a great neighborhood with people from different cultures and ethnicities. We all got along together for the most part, and we respected each other. When we weren't in school or in church, we played outside until those street lights came on, which was the signal that we had to come in, have dinner, get ready for bed, and get ready for the next day. Life was good. When I was 10 years old, my father was called to pastor a church in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. This church was in the inner city, and while we did not live in the inner city, we lived in Philadelphia, in one of the suburbs of Philadelphia, we were no longer secluded from the problems that other people had. I soon realized other people didn't share the same life that I had shared. They had to deal with issues of real poverty, police brutality, unfair housing practices, fewer employment opportunities, and many of those people sat with me every day in my father's church. And so I learned firsthand what they had to endure. Now, my father had always been involved in making life better for all people, and he found that he had to address these inequalities. As I mentioned, he was a pastor, Reverend S.A. Bracken in Philadelphia, but as all ministers do, he attended conferences around the country every year where he would meet other pastors, and they would get together and talk about issues, talk about problems they were having, and they would support each other. Well, he met Dr. Martin Luther King at one of these conferences, and my father was 9 years older, so I can't imagine it, but Dr. King used to actually go to him for advice. So they worked together on many projects, and they became friends. Now, in the early 60s, Reverend King was very involved in civil rights, and he was becoming very active, and he was a name that many people knew. So he was planning to visit Philadelphia to discuss what the churches and the people in Philadelphia could do to help in the civil rights movement. So my father helped to organize a public meeting, which was to be held at one of the larger churches in Philadelphia. My dad told my siblings and me that we had to get ready one evening because we were going to church that night. Well, we begged and pleaded. We said we had homework, we had things to do. But no amount of begging would change his mind, so we got dressed, we were obedient, and we said, okay, we'll go. Now I thought, what is the big deal? I had met so many of my father's minister friends, and I believed I would be fine if I skipped hearing this one. Actually, I felt that my father and his preacher friends were responsible in some way for making me sacrifice two things that I really liked: Coca-Cola and Tasty Cake cupcakes. My dad explained to me that we were going to boycott, which means not purchase or use the services or goods of a certain company as a protest. Why did they have to choose Coca-Cola and Tasty Cake cupcakes? But I had no choice. For me, that was a very big sacrifice. So I felt I was being dragged against my will to hear someone who might put more of these ideas in my father's mind. So I sat in the pew, hoping this speech would be over quickly and I would not have to give up any more things that I really loved. Then I heard my father's name called to introduce the speaker. He was the one chosen to introduce Dr. King to the crowd. Now, when Dr. King arose to speak, I must say, I imagined this physical giant would come with a big roaring voice because he was so important in the world. Well, I was surprised that Dr. King really was small in stature. He actually was 5 feet 7 inches tall. And when he began to speak, he started in a very soft voice. To be truthful, I never planned to pay attention to what Dr. King was going to say. But as he started to talk about the terrible things that were happening to people in the South, I began to pay attention. I remembered hearing stories of people having to drink from several water fountains and many other injustices. But it really didn't touch me because I lived in the North and we didn't have to suffer those indignities. So Dr. King encouraged the people of Philadelphia to organize and find ways that even though we lived in the North, that we could help in the struggle for equal rights for people in the South and all over the nation. Still, I said, you know, he's talking to the adults. He's not talking to me. I'm just here because my father insisted. So the speech was finally over, and it was time to go home. As usual, my father was missing. He was nowhere in sight, so we decided to look for him. We began our hunt by checking out the offices in the church to listen for voices behind closed doors. We were successful. We were pretty good at this. And so in true fashion, instead of waiting patiently, as we had always been instructed to do, my siblings and I decided we would look through the keyhole to see if we could figure out if maybe they were standing up and getting ready to leave. Just imagine 4 young children all trying to take turns to look through one keyhole. It didn't work. Before we knew it, the door opened and we fell through the doorway, sprawled on the ground, right at the feet of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. Embarrassed, we scrambled to our feet, brushed ourselves off, and stood silently to face my father's stern stare. Now, thank goodness my father had a sense of humor. He broke into a smile and simply said, "Dr. King, I think my children want to meet you." Dr. King also broke into a smile and he chuckled and said, "You remind me of my 4 little children. Thank you for making me feel at home." At that point, he shook our hands. Now, I was the 3rd child, so of course, I was the 3rd one to shake his hand. Then something happened. I remember his hand was soft, but powerful. As he grasped my hand, it seemed as though the floor underneath me had turned into clouds, and I felt some kind of change within me. I didn't realize what had happened to me then, and not for many years after, but I believe that it was that handshake at that moment that the path in my life, my calling, began. No longer did I resent the fact that I had to boycott Coca-Cola and Tasty Cakes. Soon we were able to eat and drink them again because the boycott was successful. I remember feeling proud that my father, even though the gas tank on his car was almost on empty, drove past the Sunoco gas stations to protest their unfair hiring practices. I took a new interest in events that were happening to people in the South and started to appreciate the safer life that I had, even though, because of my father's leadership in Philadelphia in fighting police brutality, we had to have 24-hour security at our home because of bomb threats. I stopped resisting my mother's insistence that we give up a few Saturdays a year to volunteer at the Whosoever Gospel Mission and Rescue Home, a facility for children and adults with severe physical challenges. A major turning point for me in my personal call to action was when I heard about 4 little girls who were attending Sunday school one September morning in Birmingham, Alabama. Someone had planted a bomb in the church and they were killed. Dr. King attended the funerals and later spoke about protecting our children. I decided, what could I do? And then I had an idea. I would volunteer at my church's Sunday school. And later, as I got older, I became a Sunday school teacher. That gave me a desire to become a teacher. And so, when I entered college, I majored in education. And I also became involved in some actions at the school, which resulted in having the school, I went to Pennsylvania State University. We started the first African American cultural center at that school. Now, when I moved to Connecticut and started working in independent schools, I found so many opportunities to continue Dr. King's work. From being a multicultural advisor at Miss Porter's school, to teaching at Renbrook School, to becoming the head of the middle school at Watkinson School, and ending my career as the director of community outreach at Renbrook School. I always made opportunities to encourage all students to have compassion for those in need, to stand up for what is right and just, to respect and celebrate the history and culture of all people. I'm most proud of being one of the founding members of the Sphere Consortium, which still exists today and works to provide inclusive communities at our area independent schools by providing programs that help you work on issues of equity and justice. Now, I know you have many opportunities at Westminster to participate in community service, and that's very good. All over the nation, people are using this day to serve others. I hope that the experiences that you gain here will light a fire in you to continue to help those who, because of unfortunate circumstances or a real injustice, are walking in darkness. I have a question I want you to think about. What have you done to fight for equity and justice when it wasn't comfortable or convenient? And I have a hope for each of you. That is, that you will meet someone in your life who will, with just a handshake, ignite something in you so that whatever career you choose, you will find a way to light the path of others who are walking in darkness so that you can share in being a part of Dr. King's legacy. Thank you, and reach out and touch somebody's hand today.
Life's most persistent and urgent question is, what are you doing for others? Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr.
Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart feel lonely and long for heaven and home? When Jesus